Hello and welcome to the IBM update. This month we discuss an article in Wired magazine on COBOL and ask if it's the equivalent of coding asbestos. We also take a trip north and south and visit the UK IUG events, plus we meet with friend of the update and Fortra stalwart Mike Davison and discuss the recently released IBM Marketplace survey, and finally we have the prices for Bob. All this provided by Proximity, your partners for IBM application support, development and modernisation. Now, a recent Wired article calls COBOL the asbestos of programming languages. Not because it's inherently bad, because it's everywhere, deeply embedded and extremely difficult to remove. But it misses the real issue. Replacement isn't necessarily the answer. What the article fails to observe is that COBOL isn't failing. For decades, it has underpinned vast amounts of global infrastructure, particularly in finance and government, where it continues to run critical high-volume systems. So the challenge isn't that it doesn't work, it works exceptionally well, but that the knowledge required to maintain and evolve these systems is becoming increasingly scarce. This framing feels especially relevant in light of the latest Fortra IBM Marketplace survey. Now, for those who did miss last month's update, I reported that for the first time in nearly a decade, IBM skills, not cybersecurity, are now the number one concern for organisations, with around 69% of respondents highlighting that skills shortage is their top issue. This marks a significant shift. For years, security dominated the conversation. Now, the industry is recognising something more fundamental. You can't secure, modernise or even run a system if you don't have the people who understand it. Okay, if you couple this with COBOL's importance in running the world, you start to see the bigger picture. For example, over 200 billion lines of COBOL code are running as I speak. This accounts for nearly 80% of all working code. Now you see, COBOL still quietly powers much of the modern world. There's credit card payments, airline bookings, government services. They all still depend on COBOL to function. A quick example. During the pandemic, when services needed to adapt to changing situations, the systems didn't falter because of infrastructure. They struggled because there weren't enough COBOL specialists available to adapt them. And the Wired article too highlighted these same structural problems that are still echoed within the IBM estates today. That many of these applications that sit at the heart of business have been developed and refined over decades. They're not outdated in function, in fact, they're bespoke to perfection. These systems have deeply embedded business logic, layers of business rules built in over time. Of course, often undocumented and with a shrinking pool of talent that hasn't scaled over time. We're seeing experienced developers nearing retirement with fewer entrants coming through. This leaves businesses exposed. And with systems themselves, well, these are so business critical that even small changes carry significant risk. As such, large-scale replacement or transformation programs can introduce more uncertainty than stability, which is most of the time why they never fully materialize. I see the Wired article more like a wake-up call. Because this isn't about legacy technology anymore, It's more about operational risk. And replacing systems introduces risk at great expense. So the argument here is, why remove rock-solid code that has worked and continues to work reliably and efficiently and introduce uncertainty? The idea of replacing COBOL sounds clean on paper, but in reality it means rewriting years, sometimes decades of business critical logic, much of which isn't fully documented. So of course this introduces risk, cost and uncertainty. So, options. Very briefly, refactoring keeps the core logic, but restructuring it improves maintainability while preserving what already works. Recoding sits somewhere in between, translating existing function into new language or platform. Each approach has its place, but all carry cost, complexity and risk. Modernisation, however, allows you to keep the concrete foundations that have already held up the business for many, many years and build new capability around them. And then on the human front, organisations facing the COBOL skills challenge really have three choices: retain, retrain or outsource. Retraining experienced developers provides continuity but comes harder as the talent pool shrinks. Retraining internal teams can work, but it takes time and still relies on having enough existing knowledge to transfer. Outsourcing to a managed service provider offers a more immediate and structured solution, bringing in proven expertise, reducing dependency on individuals and ensuring the system is properly supported. However, the key here is making that conscious decision, because doing nothing simply allows the risk to grow over time. And then what of AI? Could this help with resourcing, refactoring or modernising? Certainly AI can help. Indeed, in February, Anthropic announced that Claude can automate the analysis and migration of legacy COBOL code. However, considerations about architecture, integration and operational risk are keys to a project success. As IBM stated, translating code is one thing, modernising a platform is something entirely different. You see, the real challenge isn't the COBOL language, it is everything around it. The compliance, procedure, operational process, audit, middleware. Years of bespoke tooling and code factored in organically around this core system. So using AI to modernise legacy code is a bit like using an automated translation tool. You can translate Chinese into English and get something that looks broadly correct, but without someone who truly understands the language, you risk losing the nuance, context and meaning behind it. The same applies to COBOL. AI can convert syntax, but it may not inherently understand the business logic, edge cases and intent built into the code over decades. Without expert people involved, you may end up with something that works on the surface, but misses what really matters underneath. So, to bring the Wired article to a conclusion, is COBOL asbestos? No, it's reinforced concrete. Old, yes, but still holding everything up. A proven foundation to build upon, not rip out. The real question isn't whether it works, it does. It's how you design the next layer, how you evolve it, support it and build on top of it. The foundations are already there. The decisions are what you do next and how you do that. Now, last month I reviewed the 2026 Fortra IBM Marketplace survey and compared it to the previous few years to spot trends and predict the future too. If you've not had a chance to catch up on that episode, I'll put a link below. This month, however, I took the opportunity to speak with Fortra stalwart, IBM champion and all-round good guy Mike Davison to discuss the survey and learned his thoughts on some of the surprises. Mike, welcome to the IBM update.
Pleasure to be here, Andy.
Now, for the first time in 9 years, the IBM skills gap has overtaken security as the number one concern in the Fortra survey. What do you think has driven that shift?
Now, I'm sure it's people retiring and no one to replace them. Us Gen Xers who pioneered the IBM are reaching retirement, and because that perception of IBM, its legacy and it's not cool, is I suspect why younger people are not interested. However, shifts in development such as using Git and Visual Studio for development and modernisation programs using AI will help. I can't help feeling that the platform is behind the skills drag curve by a long way right now.
In this year's survey, what was the most surprising trend you observed compared to last year's results?
It was absolutely code development shifting by 13% to be using AI. And that's the biggest shift in the whole survey. And it just goes to show that companies are embracing the AI age, which is great as that talent pool is reducing. And that's a good way to make up that deficit. And I feel it's a great and good use of AI.
Terrific. Now, the survey shows a record 70% of organizations planning hardware or software upgrades in 2026. What's driving that level of urgency? Does it feel like a tipping point for the platform?
In terms of hardware, well, Power 9 went end of support at the end of January this year, which means there's going to be no further patches, microcode or security fixes. And with the announcement of Power 11 last year, sensible customers are going to be looking to upgrade their older systems to stay current. Now, let's remember that Power 9 launched in 2017 and 18, which is 8 years ago. And that's an absolute age in computing terms these days. The other kicker is that Power 9 doesn't support IBM 7.6, which was released April last year. So anyone on Power 9, if they want IBM 7.6 and all the new goodness that goes with it, are going to have to upgrade both their hardware and the operating system.
Not quite. Now, Mike, while cybersecurity has been eclipsed as the top concern, it still remains a high concern in the rankings. What do you believe is the biggest security worry respondents are now facing?
Well, if we look at the top 3 security concerns from the report, the first is that threats are constantly changing, which creates that anxiety of a moving target. The second is that skills gap we talked about earlier, and that lack of security knowledge for the platform is now starting to show. And third, the act of balancing security controls against a business's efficiency. Many customers need to meet regulatory requirements, and if you combine that with the skills gap, the moving target of threats, and it's a perfect storm of problems. And that area is a major headache for businesses. As I've said before, the IBM is highly securable. You just need to know how to do it properly.
Quite. Now, based upon the survey, what modernisation strategies do you see gaining momentum in the IBM community?
Well, 35% of respondents are now using AI for code development, and 68% see this as the future. So I see that as a big shift in the development process, which will make it more appealing to the younger generation, hopefully. But companies need to modernise their applications, not just their development process. If we look at the survey results, 73% of businesses are running in-house applications and 88% are coding in RPG. And it's that also needs a long, hard look at as well, in my opinion.
Quite right. And for the first time, Visual Studio Code usage has surpassed RDI. What do you think this tells us about how IBM development is evolving?
Well, RDI is aimed specifically at the IBM I, whereas Visual Studio is a feature-rich development tool. It integrates with Git for modern application stacks. More companies are moving to use Git for their source control, and Visual Studio integrates with it nicely. Even myself, as a non-developer, as I've moved to Visual Studio for my CL and script code, because it's just far easier for deployment and version control.
Makes good sense. Now, one new thing IBM I has been talking about is tools such as Bob, and this is to support AI assisted development on IBM I, of course. What's your view on Bob? What it will actually do in practice?
Well, right now I see Bob as a tool that can be used to document legacy code, maybe improve it, and be used for assisting development. Steve Will's vision is to see Bob as helping you do the entire modernization journey from start to finish, which means writing new RPG code, refactoring legacy code, debugging, unit testing, educating and mentoring, documentation and project planning, to name but a few of the ideas he's put forwards. And a lot of people are raving about it. And after seeing a live demo at Tech Exchange in Orlando last year, I can see why. It really is something else. However, its true capabilities are yet to be discovered by the general marketplace, I feel.
I think there's a lot to come from Mr. Bob this year, so
for sure,
IPL will be reporting upon that in the IBM I update. Now, when you look at a combination of skill shortages, increased upgrade activity, evolved toolings and ongoing security concerns, what do you believe is a well-prepared IBM I organization looks like in 2026?
For me, that vision is an organization that's up to date with patches, is current on supported hardware and software, one that is using Visual Studio and Git for their development process, one that is recruiting and paying good salaries to retain top talent and not having single points of failure in an organization, whether that's a human or a device. And as I've said before, I think IT is a constantly moving target and you must keep up. Otherwise it becomes expensive to catch up later. It's a cost of doing business. And I see so many customers who are not current on the operating system or their ISV software, and they wonder why they have problems.
Yes, indeed. So we'll look forward to the next IBM I Marketplace survey in 2027. With all the questions, when do you think that will be released, Mike?
It's the same time every year, so it'll be around February of 2027. We'll start the collection process in, I think it's October, November this year. And let's see if we can increase the numbers of respondents year on year to get a much better picture for our marketplace survey.
I think it's all important to the community moving forward. Mike, thank you very much for your efforts with the marketplace survey. Thank you to Fortra, and I wish you a very good day.
Thank you very much, sir. Until next time.
Cheers now.
My thanks again to Mike for joining me on the IBM I update. In the past few weeks, I've been travelling the length and breadth of the country, visiting the IUG North and South events. Here's my quick take on both. First, for the early starters, it's always reassuring that the good people at IUG know how to feed their audience. At both the North event, hosted at their spiritual home in Rochdale, and South at IBM in London, on arrival, you are treated to an assortment of pastries, plus the obligatory bacon butties in Rochdale. IBM stole the show, however, with their drinks dispenser that did everything from latte to cappuccino, with a myriad of options for milk, espresso strength, frankly the works. Someone in the queue likened it to IBM MQ, a wealth of options but complicated to operate. I like that. London too was by far the grander of locations. you are greeted by IBM's first quantum computer as a display piece in the rather plush lobby, before collecting the guest pass and being whistled up the stories to the Think Suite, which hosted the day's proceedings. Both North and South shared the same agenda, and I'll pick out some pertinent parts to give you a flavour of what it's like to attend. Education is always a focus for IUG, and Chairman Mike Ryan discussed the iGnite initiative, of which continues to grow. Essentially, this initiative has been set up with partnering universities to train the next generation of IBM I professionals, and some of the students who were on the course were at the event to network and indeed learn more. The keynote speech was conducted by the board members, each providing their own insight. Andy Ewens, for example, explained that while in the past he eulogised about ACS, a better method today could be with the use of DB2 for I, VS Code extensions, to run SQL statements and display the results in a number of more friendly ways. He went on to say that with VS Code, you have more flexibility in the way you can chart with selections, filter, and queries completed at a click. Steve Cast provided insight into the evolution of IBM I development tools from SEU way back in the 1980s right up to IBM Bob in 2026, demonstrating how far we've come in the past 40 plus years, and why developers today have never had it so good. Steve Bradshaw gave us an episode of Why Don't You? And gave us a short and simple but valuable advice on areas such as how to check if you're being hacked, how to check if your system is up to date and performing well, and how to check for obsolete users too. But I think of most value was the topic of backup and protection. Here Mike Ryan presented with Eddie Chafin of ABP World Foods. And I always feel it's valuable to learn how people have solved problems in real life scenarios. Mike opened with the case study of JLR and the effects of the cyber attack inflicted on the business last year, completely shutting down production for 5 weeks, causing over 500 million in losses and costs. To mitigate risk, Mike put forward his perfect infrastructure that included flash system SAN storage and flash copy. The real-world example that Eddie is to use in 2026 was with the flash system 5600. This sits just above entry level and is a 24 CPU system, and it chewed through an astonishing 30 gigabytes a second. The top spec 9600 moved at a whopping 86 gigabytes a second. If you think about it, in some instances that's a business's entire enterprise system flash copied in just a couple of seconds. Is it expensive? Well, yes it is, but not half as expensive as the situation in which faced JLR. Now, lunch is always a treat at IBM, and this year didn't disappoint. The spread was a delight, and a special mention to the fish pie, which was some of my best lunchtime eatings I'd done all year. One final presentation I'd like to cover, and keeping within the business resilience theme, was on Power Virtual Server and the growing ecosystem that IBM is delivering. Here, Tony Bastans provided insight into how IBM's offering provides a 70% better total cost of ownership over AWS and Azure on IBM I. But more than that, Power 11 was available on launch with the ability to decouple the OS from physical hardware for virtual serial number licensing. Today, IBM have 1,000 plus clients and 24 worldwide data centers, with resilience baked into the offering to provide almost instant server crossover. We, at Proximity, even got a mention with our use of Power VS for disaster recovery, in which we are now able to recover 50% faster with optimized performance at 80% less cost. Now, there was a lot to unpack in this presentation, and if you're looking at virtual servers, this would be the place to start. There was more packed into the day, and if you stuck around until the end, you could have enjoyed a tour and demonstration of various IBM technologies, including Spot the Dog. A very educational but fun day. Thank you, IOG. Now, we've all seen the hype around Project Bob. I've done a number of posts in the update in previous episodes. But what's been less clear is how much is it going to cost? Well, that was until now. Following the announcement, Nick Litton broke this down, and it's worth understanding because for the majority of us, this is likely how AI tooling on the IBM I is going to be consumed going forward. So, Bob allows you to have a free trial with 40 Bob coins. I'll get onto those in just a minute. Once they've been consumed or a month has elapsed, you have a choice of 3 tiers. First, Pro at $20 per month, and this is a continuation of the 40 Bob coin model. So if you're an occasional coder, a solo developer or a small shop, this may be the tier for you. Next is Pro Plus. This provides 160 Bob coins and may be the sweet spot for most IBM I shops, while Ultra is the $200 offering per user per month and provides 500 Bob coins, the tier for heavy coding and modernisation. So, what are these Bob coins? Bob coins are essentially usage credits. Instead of just paying for a tool, you're paying for the amount of AI work you actually use. Small tasks cost very little, but bigger jobs like code refactoring or modernisation use more coins. It's a simple model, but it does mean that AI becomes something you actively manage, not just switch on. So Bob coins act as a simplified way to measure the AI consumption. With small tasks, they take about 0.1 to half a coin. Bits of code modernization taking between 2 to 6 coins, with complex workflows having a higher coin usage. So it effectively turns AI into a metered resource rather than a fixed cost tool. But do we see this as a tokenized way to increase workflow? Well, yes, and it's important to remember that Project Bob will not remove the need for IBM I expertise. No, instead it'll amplify it. And with this pricing model, AI is becoming commercially structured in a way that directly ties cost to development output. Once development becomes metered and scalable, the real question becomes who's managing it, who's controlling it, and making sure it delivers value. And this is where the real opportunity sits. And that's it for this month's IBM I update. I do hope you enjoyed this episode. For more like this and to subscribe to the IBM I update, please see our blog on the Proximity website and on LinkedIn too. But for now, I'm Andrew Nicholson. We're Proximity, the IBM I application managed service partners that are in your corner. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.